Hi, I'm JJ. Welcome. I'm back with a couple more book recommendations, random books that I enjoyed that I wanted to share with you just so that I can either digest them more fully or just gush about them. So here they are. I actually have a physical copy of this book. I just don't have it on me right now. But the first one is The Portrait of a Thief by Grace D. Lee. And I thoroughly enjoyed that book. It's so fun. It's a group of Chinese American college age people who decide that they're going to work together to try to steal back Chinese artifacts from museums because they want to give them back to their own culture, their own government. And they're being paid to do this by who they're assuming is somebody within their country or their family's country. And so you have like a getaway driver, you have the hacker, the con artist. You have this like eclectic group of people who don't all know each other, but they're all have their own reasons for wanting to do this. And some of them have a good understanding of their identity, and some are struggling to understand what their Chinese part of their identity means to them. And so they learn more about themselves by trying to learn more about China. And so it was fun. It was educational. It was fascinating. It was just a really great read. I read it a while ago. I think it was a few years now, and I still think about it constantly. As soon as I get it back, I'm probably going to be doing a reread soon at the end of this year or so. And I just love the idea of being taught stuff that I wasn't fully aware of before. Like we all have like conflicting ideas about like going to a zoo, like about the animals and stuff there, and also when you go into the museum, like it's great to be able to go to the museum and learn things, but knowing that many of the artifacts were either stolen during colonization and then never returned. Many of them had been mislabeled because they were like donated by rich people who had no understanding of the culture in which they got the artifacts from, and all that stuff. It just kind of gives you a new perspective when you're going to museums and stuff. And who doesn't like a heist story, heist film, like anything like they're fun, especially like when you have everybody after them, and you have this like mysterious benefactor, and it's like, can you trust them or not? Are they doing it for the right reasons or not? And so you have a lot to try to dig through. You have a lot just to keep your interest in, and I really enjoyed it. And this year, earlier in the year, I read Loot. It's about Britain and the Benin art that was stolen during their colonization there, and the fight to reclaim all these stolen artifacts, and what should be done with them, and how it should be done. And like an earlier video where I had mentioned the indigenous aspect of the bones that are being kept in museums and in college campuses and stuff that have not been returned. Like it's kind of all around the same line about who owns what, who has the right to what, and why are we not doing more to make things right, and to make sure that the peoples whose stuff this was gets it back, or at least has access to it. And I just, it's a area of interest to me, and I know there's other books. There was another one that I wanted to read, British History, I think it was called. I'll look it up and put it down in the notes, but instead of British Museum rather than British Museum. And so that was something that I might follow up on. But yeah, I definitely recommend the Portrait of the Thief. But if you want a bigger understanding and see how wide-arcing it is, Warrior Girl Unearthed, with the bones aspect for the indigenous people, and loot for the Benin kingdom, which is was in Africa, and that way you're getting a big, wide spectrum of how prevalent this issue is. And then I do have physical copies of a couple of the other books that I wanted to talk about. Indian Horse, but this one's by Richard Wagamese. And so a little backstory about, so in the United States and in Canada, when they were trying to get rid of the indigenous peoples here, they governments, the American and Canadian governments, would kidnap the kids from their families and send them, force them into these schools to Christianize them, to, as the book says, they would try to, spare the souls, basically torture the savage, but spare the soul type of thing. And so anything went for how they were going to civilize what they perceived as savages. And it is a brutal and horrifying history that both of our countries made these children and these families in these communities endure. And so this is a story from the Canadian perspective of one of those residential schools, and how it affects him later on. So this kid ended up being really good at hockey, and so he was able to get out of these schools and escape it. But he, had depression later. He had he was an alcoholic and was losing a lot of his opportunities. He had to give up hockey and everything, and he started. It's kind of told in flashbacks, and there's some horrific stories in here when he talks about what it was like in those schools. And this is fictionalized, but these are things that happened to these kids in these schools. So he has to come to terms with that part of his past, accept that part of his past, and it's very hard to read at times, but it was such a good read. It was one of my 5-star reads last year. So Indian Horse, and there is a movie that they made out of it. It's not nearly as good. It has to cut a lot of the stuff out, and it doesn't get to do the flashback stuff that was really cool. It doesn't get to do some of the big reveals that were in it. It doesn't really get to get the essence of how great this book was. But if you only have access to the movie, I would definitely suggest checking that movie out. The other book that's a very similar vein, but from the American point of view, so from a Native American indigenous person rather than a Canadian indigenous, is The Seedkeeper, and that's by Diane Wilson, and that takes place in Minnesota. And what is significant about this. It talks in different time periods about this family's struggle with the white settlers that were taking them from their land forcefully, and then eventually there was a couple that had to go into the residential homes in a different generation, and then now it's a following generation. So it kind of, you get to see the effect on all these different generations through these different stories. And it's significant that the town that they're in Minnesota is also the town where during while the North and South were fighting in the Civil War, there was a huge they tried to go to war. The Native Americans there tried to go to war against the white settlers because of how horribly they had been mistreated over the years, and they finally retaliated and declared war on the white people there, and the white people then captured a whole bunch of them and wanted to have Lincoln give them the okay to then to kill them all, and he allowed them to kill 38, and so this indigenous girl who doesn't know all that history, but you get to follow along with her family's knowledge of these histories, and she lives in this town where they talk about the tragedy, but from only the white perspective, and how many of their people were killed by the tribe that came in and slaughtered them or whatever. But they're not talking about like the whys. They're not talking about what happened after. They're not reckoning with the whole truth, and she has to like relearn this part of her past and her culture, and just kind of it's her story, and it's her family's story, and that's fiction as well, but it was good. And so this is actually one that I haven't read, but I picked it up after reading The Seedkeeper, just for more context, and this is 38 Nooses, Lincoln, Little Crow, and the Beginning of the Frontier's End. And this is about that event that I was telling you about. And I'll just read the back just for a little bit of context. So in August 1862, after suffering decades of hardship, broken treaties, and relentless encroachment on their land, the Dakota leader Little Crow reluctantly agreed that his people must go to war. After 6 weeks of fighting, the uprising was smashed. Thousands of Indians were taken prisoner by the U.S. Army, and 303 Dakotas were sentenced to death. President Lincoln, embroiled in the most devastating period of the Civil War, personally intervened to save the lives of 265 of those condemned men, but in the end, 38 Dakota men would be hanged in the largest government-sanctioned execution in U.S. history. So I do intend to read that, and if anyone else would like to read that, so maybe we can do like a buddy read in September. Just let me know if anyone else would be interested. And before I go to the last book, I just wanted to point out, I don't know how well you can see the shirt that I'm wearing, but it is Justice for the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. I thought it was appropriate to wear for this video. I had worn a hat that I have earlier, but it is something that I keep like to bring awareness to and keep talking about. So the last one was a recommendation from one of my former co-workers, and it's a young adult, almost children's book. I would say middle grade possibly. It doesn't say the age range on here, but he had recommended it, and I read it, and I really liked it. I had never heard of it before, but it's Carry On, Mr. Bowditch. And this is historical fiction, but it's based on a real person. It's just, you have to fictionalize because you don't know every single events of his life, but it's very much more like a biography. And so he is was a famous for navigation and stuff, and he wrote the navigation, the booklet that the U.S. Navy still uses, and he did it in the late 1700s, early 1800s. So this takes place right towards the end of the American Revolution, so late 1700s. It was said at the beginning, 4 years since the war started, and so it's around like 1779, 1780. And so he starts, and he eventually becomes an indentured servant, and he learns. He's very good at mathematics, and he learns multiple languages just so he can learn more of the newer mathematics that are, or even older mathematics, but they were written in like Latin and French and different stuff. So he had to teach himself these languages so that he could learn math. And then he wanted to learn more languages, and so he used the Bible, and he had the Bible, a thesaurus, and he in the languages that he wanted to use, because he knew the Bible, and so he could read the passages that he had memorized in these languages, and then kind of use a thesaurus to like figure out the rest of the words. And so he taught himself a whole bunch of languages that way, on top of teaching himself navigation, never having been on a ship until he gets himself indentured. Rather than working the books on land, he tries to get the opportunity to be able to buy off his freedom sooner, and so he does it that way by going and being on a ship. And so he learns about sailing, he learns about navigation, and basically by teaching himself and learning everything he can. He teaches some of the crew to read, and like he's such a fascinating character, or not character but person, that in history that I had no idea about. So I'm really glad that I took his recommendation and read this book. But once again, it's Carry On, Mr. Bowditch. And those are my random book recommendations this time. And I just want to ask, like, I'm since I'm newer here and I'm trying to figure out how often I'm going to start posting stuff, and what kind of videos and stuff you guys would like to see. If you do have any suggestions, like, I will do the weekly wrap-ups. I will be doing random book recommendations and stuff. But if there's any kind of content that you want me to post, or like tags, or stuff that you're interested in, I also might do a Q&A video if there's any questions that you want me to ask, bookish questions about my hobbies or whatever. Just let me know so I can make some more and better content for you. Thank you, enjoy, and happy reading.